Let's speak to Reading East MP, Matt Rodder. Hello to you there, Matt.
Oh, good morning, Phil.
OK, what did you make of the changes? What's your reaction?
Similar to Lisa, small steps, but really much more significant changes needed. And in particular, an end to the single word judgment, which is so simplistic, perhaps replacing with something more like a report card that shows a range of strengths across the school. But also just changing the culture of Ofsted so it's less punitive and it's more of a kind of supportive process for schools. I think that's really important. And then also separating out safeguarding, which is a hugely important, but it needs to be seen as somewhat distinct from the rest of the inspection.
I was going to ask you, do they go far enough? And clearly by that answer, you're not convinced. So what you're really suggesting is complete root and branch, everything change, a whole new way of doing school inspections.
Well, it's important that we reform Ofsted. And what we're talking about is having a better type of inspection. And so inspection is important. It provides information to parents and to schools themselves. But it does need to work in a different way. And that's what we would like to see. And that's both myself and the other people who've been working on this.
I suppose when you look at it as a whole, I was going to ask you, do you think these changes will come as a relief for teachers? Also, there are students, there are parents, and the community itself. So a school doing well and getting a pat on the back is always going to be good. And unfortunately, we've seen in the past, it doesn't always get that, and it does have a knock-on. So how do you make those changes make a difference?
Well, I think first of all, just it's worth thinking about what's happened here in the local community in Caversham and across Reading as a whole. Ruth was an exemplary head teacher, and this report, clearly there were some flaws in the report, to put it mildly. And she obviously, what's happened is the most awful tragedy. So at a local level, I think that these will be seen as small steps. But it's nowhere near what Ruth's sister Julia and the other campaigners would like. And really, we need to look forward to having a much more widespread reform of Ofsted, as I mentioned, that's based around it becoming a more supportive organisation, which has a different approach when it visits a school.
And what are local people saying to you, especially parents, schools in general?
Well, in Caversham and across Reading, a lot of parents have enormous sympathy and love and respect for Ruth, and they want to see change taking place. There were something like, I think it was 300 people came to the memorial service for Ruth, which is a secular event at Reading Town Hall, and they just expressed their support for the family and their appreciation for her wonderful leadership as a head teacher. So there's a great deal of sympathy and I think also realisation in the local community that Ofsted does need to be reformed.
Just finally, well, I mean, it won't be the end of changes, but do you think there is more to come? And what can the government do? As the Education Secretary has hands tied, because Ofsted is an independent body anyway. It sort of makes its own changes. So how do you make that happen? Does that have to be something that you and fellow MPs and Parliament come to an arrangement and organise?
Well, we've had 2 meetings with Gillian Keegan, who's the Education Secretary, and I'm grateful for her having those meetings. And I'm pleased that the process has started. But as we said earlier, these are relatively small steps, and I think the issue now is for Ofsted to realise the scale of the change that's needed. As was mentioned earlier, that they are an independent body, but I do hope they'll listen and continue to reflect on what's happened and work with us to try and make much more significant change.
Really good to speak to you, Matt. Thank you very much indeed. That is Reading East MP Matt Rodder with his thoughts on that story about the Ofsted changes. All the latest, bbc.co.uk/Berkshire.